Have you ever crossed paths with someone so committed to crushing your spirit that they'd go to any length to break you? What if that person wielded a badge and gun, the very symbol of law and order? In this story, a brilliant young woman finds herself caught in the crosshairs of a racist cop, hell-bent on framing her for a crime she never committed. But what the officer doesn't know is that he's tangling with a force far greater than he can imagine, a woman who refuses to be silenced. Get ready for a pulse-pounding saga of betrayal, redemption, and an unforgettable twist of karma. Ava Rodriguez stood on the curb outside a modest coffee shop in Chicago's West Town, sipping a cappuccino while scanning through her phone for the day's headlines. She had recently wrapped up her master's in criminal justice and was anxious to put her knowledge to work. Having grown up in a working-class neighborhood on the South Side, she understood how deeply systems could fail the vulnerable and how crucial it was to fight for fairness. Her dream was to join an organization like the Innocence Project, a real-life non-profit that exonerates the wrongfully convicted. But first she needed to pass the bar exam. That morning felt particularly serene. The summer sun was bright, but a gentle breeze softened its heat. People hurried by, some dressed in suits, others in jeans and t-shirts, each person seemingly preoccupied with their own busy day. A sense of anticipation filled her. She had a job interview later that afternoon at a small but promising defense firm, one that specialized in cases of police misconduct. The excitement in her chest was tempered only by the usual pre-interview jitters. She drained the last of her cappuccino and headed to her car, determined to arrive early and make a strong first impression. She never made it to that interview, though. Her day was about to be hijacked by a chance encounter that would set the stage for a battle she never asked for, but was more than ready to fight. The traffic on the way toward the law firm's downtown office was heavier than usual. Ava eased her car into a right-hand lane, checking her mirrors obsessively. Her father had always taught her to be extra vigilant. "Drive like the city is out to get you," he used to say, part caution and part joke. A few blocks away from her destination, she noticed flashing lights in the rearview mirror. A police cruiser was signaling her to pull over. Confused, Ava glanced at her speedometer. She wasn't speeding. She hadn't run any lights. She used her turn signals. She checked everything she could think of. Reluctantly, she pulled over to the side of the road, heart thumping, running through her mental checklist for encounters with law enforcement. Stay calm. Keep your hands visible. Answer questions respectfully, she reminded herself silently. A tall, broad-shouldered officer with a stern face emerged from the cruiser. He walked up to her driver's side window and tapped on the glass. His eyes flicked over her with a look she couldn't quite place, somewhere between suspicion and condescension. "Good morning, Officer," Ava said, in a polite yet firm tone, rolling down her window. "Is there a problem?" "License and registration," he demanded. No greeting, no explanation, just a cold, clipped tone. His name tag read, Harding. Officer John Harding. She noticed a faint sneer at the corner of his lips. Ava's nerves jangled. She felt something off about the way he was looking at her, like he was doing quick mental math on her ethnicity, her attire, her everything. She handed over the documents, her mind racing. "Do you have any idea why I might have stopped you, Miss Rodriguez?" The officer asked, slowly, pronouncing her last name as if to highlight her heritage. The question sounded more like an accusation. "I honestly don't, sir," she replied. "I believe I followed all traffic laws." Harding nodded slowly, seeming unsatisfied. "We've had some reports of suspicious vehicles in the area." He paused for effect. You matched the description. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She knew full well what that meant, a wide category that often targeted drivers who looked like her. Still, she kept her composure. Sir, I'm on my way to a job interview. I don't understand how my car could be considered suspicious. Instead of responding, Harding walked around to the rear of the vehicle and tapped on the trunk. Then he paused as if listening for something. Step out of the car, Miss Rodriguez. I need to do a routine check. The pit in Ava's stomach deepened. She knew her rights, but also knew that refusing a search could escalate tensions. Cautiously, she unbuckled her seatbelt and exited the vehicle, all the while mentally preparing to record or document whatever happened next. Something told her this officer was trouble. Standing on the sidewalk, Ava watched as Officer Harding methodically checked the trunk and passenger areas of her car. She kept her hands clasped in front of her, trying to appear as unthreatening as possible, though she bristled at the indignity of the moment. Pedestrians walked by, some slowing to gawk at the spectacle of a woman being stopped by police. Others hurried along, anxious to avoid any entanglement. Ava tried to catch the eye of a passerby, silently pleading for a witness who might remain on the scene if things got weird. But no one lingered. She was about to ask Harding if he found anything, when he suddenly stood up, a small plastic bag in his hand. Confusion morphed into disbelief as she realized what it was. A bag of what looked like cocaine. Ava's heart nearly stopped. Where had that come from? Would you care to explain this? Harding asked, brandishing the baggie like evidence of a monstrous crime. Ava's voice trembled with shock. That's not mine. I've never seen that before. You must have... She froze the words, choking in her throat. She had a million reasons to believe the worst, but also knew that accusing an officer of planting evidence was a serious step. Still, no part of her believed that Baggy was genuine evidence. Harding's lips curled into a smirk. Sure, it's not yours, he said in a tone dripping with sarcasm. Look, Miss Rodriguez. Maybe you just fell in with the wrong crowd. Or maybe you're trying to move product to make ends meet. Either way, we're going to have a problem, unless you come with me down to the station. It was as if the world had slowed down. Ava could feel the wind, hear her own heartbeat. She knew if she was arrested with drugs in her car, her life was about to spiral in ways she couldn't even imagine. The prospective job would vanish. Her reputation would be stained, and she might even lose her chance to practice law. Fear wrestled with outrage, both vying for control of her next words. I demand to see your dash cam footage. Your body cam footage. She finally mustered, trying to keep her voice steady. There's no reason this should have been in my car. I have no record, no prior offenses. This is a mistake. Harding raised an eyebrow. Oh, we'll get to that. Right now, you're under arrest for suspected possession of a controlled substance. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists. Ava glanced around, hoping that someone was filming, that some random bystander would come forward to testify on her behalf. But everyone seemed to have disappeared, and the ones who remained carefully avoided eye contact. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread. How had her life turned upside down? In a matter of minutes, Officer Harding shoved Ava into the back of the police cruiser, ignoring her protests of innocence. The ride to the station was short, but felt interminable. Harding radioed ahead, his tone triumphant. I've got a female suspect in possession of narcotics, bringing her in for booking. Ava sank back into the seat, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She knew enough about criminal procedure to anticipate the next steps, fingerprinting, mugshots, bail hearing. But she had never in her wildest dreams imagined she would be on the receiving end of it. At the station, she was escorted through the intake process. An officer friendlier than Harding, but equally methodical, took her fingerprints. Another snapped her mugshot. Every flash of the camera hammered home the reality of her predicament. In the background, she could see Harding talking to some colleagues, occasionally glancing in her direction. Their conversation brought a few nods, and even a chuckle from one of them. The pit in her stomach grew deeper. Were they all in on this? Was this cop known for cornering people like her? When she was finally led to a holding cell, she had barely had a chance to make her one phone call. She dialed her best friend Mona, leaving a voicemail in hushed, urgent tones. "Mona, please, I've been arrested," she hissed into the phone. "They planted drugs on me. I need a lawyer. Maybe ask around with some of your lawyer friends. I can't stay in here." Her voice cracked under the pressure, but she forced herself to remain as calm as possible. Then the officer gestured for her to wrap up the call. Behind bars, time took on a strange quality. She wasn't certain how many hours passed, memories of her childhood. Her family and her dreams of fighting for justice danced around in her mind, taunting her with the possibility that everything might slip away. Occasionally her anger toward Officer Harding flared, and she found herself fantasizing about confronting him in a courtroom, exposing him for who he really was. But as the hours dragged on, fear overshadowed her anger. She worried about bail. She worried about how a felony arrest would jeopardize her future. She worried about the unstoppable rumor mill that would swirl around her name. Late that night, an officer came to get her. "Rodriguez." "You made bail," he said, opening the cell door. A jolt of relief shot through her. Mona must have come through somehow. She prayed it was enough to keep her out of jail for good. But stepping outside the holding cell was only the first step. She'd need more than luck to unravel what had happened to her. One thing was certain, she was not going to be framed without a fight. When Ava walked out into the station's reception area, she found Mona pacing anxiously, phone in hand. The moment Mona saw her, she rushed forward and pulled Ava into a tight hug. Mona's eyes brimmed with worry. She was a tall, slim woman with an unshakable sense of loyalty once you earned her friendship. She was in your corner for life. "Oh my God. Ava, are you okay?" Mona asked, looking her up and down. "I called a friend of mine who works for a defense attorney. She helped set up your bail." Ava nodded, tears of relief making her vision blur. "I'm out, but it's not over. They're charging me with possession. He planted that stuff in my car. Mona, I know it." Mona's lips thinned. "We'll figure this out. Let's get you home, and we'll come up with a game plan in the morning." She paused, glancing over at the cluster of officers milling around. "Let's just get out of here first." They stepped out into the night air. The city was quieter now, the neon lights of the nearby diners and bars casting a faint glow on the sidewalks. Ava took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She felt like a tight coil of anxiety that couldn't unwind. Mona took her arm, guiding her to a waiting taxi. Throughout the ride back to Ava's small apartment, Mona listened patiently as Ava relived every detail of her run-in with Officer Harding. His cold demeanor, the sneering tone, the suspicious manner in which he discovered the drugs. Mona asked incisive questions, trying to pass out any weaknesses in the officer's story. By the time they reached Ava's building, Mona seemed as outraged as Ava. "We have to expose him," she said, her voice trembling with conviction. "If he's done this to you, there's a chance he's done this to others. But first we need a lawyer who'll really fight." My friend Sarah recommended a guy named Martin Kwan. He's known for civil rights cases. Let's see if we can get an appointment tomorrow." Ava nodded, a sense of hope kindling in her chest. "Yes, let's do that." Mona helped her into the apartment, gently ushering her to sit down. "Shower, eat, try to sleep," Mona advised. "I'll crash here on the couch. We'll tackle this together in the morning." Ava stared at the wall, her mind whirring with the impossible scenario she now inhabited. Everything had changed in less than 24 hours. She felt a surge of determination well up inside her. If Harding thought she would roll over and accept this, he had another thing coming. She'd survive this nightmare and expose him for the fraud he was, no matter the cost. Morning dawned grey and drizzly, matching Ava's somber mood. She woke up groggy, her mind still stuck in the cycle of worry that had kept her tossing and turning all night. Nonetheless, she forced herself to get dressed. A meeting with a lawyer was crucial, and she couldn't afford to look like she was falling apart, even if she felt that way inside. Mona made coffee as they both prepared to meet with attorney Martin Kwan. The man had a reputation for doggedly defending those who had been victimized by police misconduct. Ava had heard about him tangentially in law school, particularly in a seminar on landmark civil rights cases in Chicago. If anyone could unravel a corrupt cop's tactics, it would be him. They arrived at Kwan's modest office around 10 in the morning. The receptionist, a young man with a friendly smile, greeted them warmly and led them to a small but comfortable conference room. Moments later, Martin Kwan entered wearing a charcoal grey suit and carrying a well-worn leather briefcase. He had the air of someone perpetually busy but unfailingly sharp. His eyes scanned Ava and Mona. Then he extended a firm handshake. "Ms. Rodriguez." "Ms. Parker," he said, addressing both. "I'm sorry we have to meet under such circumstances. I've taken a look at the preliminary information your friend relayed to my office. Let's discuss in detail." Ava spent the next half-hour walking him through every aspect of her stop and arrest. Harding's demeanor, the suspicious discovery of the drugs, her background, her clean record, her aspirations to work in criminal justice. Kwan listened attentively, taking careful notes occasionally, interjecting to clarify a point. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "In my experience, planting evidence is a rare but not unheard of event. The challenge is proving it. If the officer's body cam was mysteriously turned off, or if the dash cam footage is lost, we're dealing with a classic he said, she said scenario unless we can find another piece of evidence or a witness." Ava's heart sank. The street was busy, but no one seemed to stick around. Mona chimed in. "What about the shop cameras? Any businesses nearby that might have caught the traffic stop on video?" Kwan nodded. "Exactly the type of lead we should pursue. We'll canvass the area. Also, we'll file a discovery motion for all body cam, dash cam, and radio transmission recordings. We'll request Officer Harding's disciplinary records. If he has a history, it might help discredit him." Ava felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you, Mr. Kwan. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I can't let this ruin my life." He nodded gravely. "I understand. I'll do my best to fight this. But you must prepare yourself. These cases can drag on, and the police department isn't always forthcoming. We'll have to be thorough. In the meantime, don't speak to the police or the media about your arrest without me present. Let's keep everything above board." The meeting concluded with a new sense of resolve. Ava left the office clinging to the hope that someone in Harding's precinct might slip up, or that a camera somewhere had captured what really happened. As she and Mona stepped back into the rain, Ava felt a surge of determination she would fight for the truth, no matter how steep the climb became. This was only the beginning of a war she never wanted, but was uniquely positioned to battle. Over the next few days, Ava dedicated herself to finding any possible evidence that could exonerate her. She and Mona retraced the route she had driven when Officer Harding stopped her. The area was a mix of small businesses and residential buildings. Some had security cameras pointed toward the street, and Ava spent countless hours knocking on doors, politely introducing herself, explaining she'd been falsely arrested, and asking if their cameras might have recorded the incident. Most of the responses were sympathetic, but not particularly helpful. "I'm sorry. Our camera only covers the front door," one shop owner said. Another local business had cameras, but they faced an interior courtyard rather than the street. Each polite, "No, sorry," or "We didn't record that area," chipped away at her morale, but she pressed on. Mona, in the meantime, made calls to friends, acquaintances, and anyone who might have an inside track on the Chicago Police Department's data retrieval processes. She discovered that Harding's record wasn't squeaky clean. Rumor had it he'd been implicated in a use-of-force investigation years ago, but the matter had never gone to court. The details were murky, though. "We need something more concrete," Kwan insisted when Mona relayed the information. "Something we can use in court." Finally, after 3 days of near-constant searching, they hit a small breakthrough. A tiny grocery store on a side street had a camera angled just enough to capture a portion of the main road. The store manager, an older woman named Mrs. Kim, was initially hesitant to share footage. But once Ava explained the situation, tears of desperation brimming in her eyes, Mrs. Kim softened. "I've had problems with the police in the past, too," she whispered, glancing around to ensure no one else overheard. "Wait here. I'll check if the footage still exists." Ava waited in tense silence as Mrs. Kim disappeared behind a curtain. 15 minutes later, she returned with a cautious smile. "I have some files from that day. You might be in luck." Gratitude washed over Ava. "Thank you so much. We'll pay any fee you require." Mrs. Kim shook her head. No payment. Just do the right thing if you find what you're looking for." While they still needed Kwan to review the video properly, it was a start, an actual lead. Ava's heart beat with renewed vigor. She clung to the hope that the footage would confirm that Harding had produced the bag of drugs out of nowhere, or at the very least, show any suspicious movements on his part. Before leaving, Ava wrote down her contact information and asked Mrs. Kim to keep the footage safe. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a single ray of sunlight broke through the cloud cover. It felt like a sign that maybe, just maybe, the tides were shifting in her favor. That afternoon, Ava and Mona brought the footage to Martin Kwan's office. The three of them huddled around a laptop in the conference room. Kwan popped in a USB drive Mrs. Kim had provided, opening a dated folder labeled with the day of Ava's arrest. The footage was grainy, and the grocery store's camera was positioned at a slight angle off the main street. Nonetheless, as they fast-forwarded to the timestamp matching Ava's encounter, they found a partial view of her car pulled over to the curb. They saw Officer Harding's cruiser parked behind. The image wasn't crystal clear, but it was enough to show Harding stepping out and walking to the driver's side window. Ava leaned forward, heart pounding. "Look there," she said, pointing to the officer's stance. He seemed to be reaching for something at his belt or in his pocket. The timing was suspicious. It was right before he opened the passenger side door to search her car. Kwan slowed the footage to half speed. He's definitely fiddling with something. This could be the moment he took the bag out. They watched as Harding then walked around to the trunk. The camera's angle only partially captured his movement, but one could see his arm extend briefly, as if placing something under a seat or onto the trunk floor. Then he looked up and straightened the small bag, now clearly in his hand. The entire sequence was a mere few seconds, but it looked damning. The problem was the resolution wasn't high enough to see the bag itself in his hand before he purportedly found it. Kwan exhaled, his brow furrowed. This footage isn't a smoking gun. It doesn't explicitly show him planting the drugs. But it's highly suggestive that he produced something from his belt area, right before claiming to have found narcotics in your trunk. This might not alone get the charges dropped, but it's a strong piece of evidence to cast doubt on his version of events. Is there any way to enhance the video? Mona asked, her face hopeful. We can try. I know a forensic video specialist who might be able to sharpen the image or at least highlight the movements. But even if we enhance it, we have to prepare for the department to claim it's inconclusive. Kwan removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes wearily. Still, this is a big step forward. We can argue that the officer's motions are inconsistent with a normal search procedure. Relief and frustration mingled inside Ava. She was grateful they had something, but it wasn't the undeniable proof she had hoped for. What's next? I'll file a motion to include this footage as evidence, and we'll press for all relevant records on Officer Harding. Kwan replied. We'll keep digging. In the meantime, you need to stay out of trouble and be ready to face a tough cross-examination. Harding won't go down without a fight. Ava nodded resolutely. I'm ready. In the days that followed, Ava tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. She spent her time researching case law, gathering references from professors and mentors who could attest to her character, and trying to keep her spirits up. Mona was a constant presence, offering both emotional support and practical help. Meanwhile, Kwan filed a flurry of motions, each designed to pry into Harding's past and collect any departmental records that could be relevant to Ava's defense. While the city buzzed with summer activities, music festivals, outdoor fairs, Ava felt stuck in a twilight zone of her own. Every letter from the court, every phone call from Kwan's office reminded her of the high stakes. She was used to being the one dissecting legal cases in textbooks, not the one who might serve time if she lost. The fear weighed heavily, but so did her determination. One afternoon, as she sorted through her mail, she noticed an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. I've seen what Harding does. You're not the first. Meet me at the Riverwalk Tuesday at noon. Come alone. Ava's heart raced. Was this some kind of trap or a genuine lead? The note seemed risky. If someone had information implicating Harding, why wouldn't they go directly to internal affairs or a lawyer? But curiosity and desperation won out. She decided to show it to Kwan first. He was intrigued, but also cautious. You have to be very careful, he warned. This could be a friend of Harding trying to bait you, or it could be someone with legitimate info. Let me send a private investigator with you discreetly. Despite her nerves, Ava agreed. She needed every shred of evidence she could get. Tuesday arrived, and Ava made her way to the Riverwalk, a popular area where people lounged along the water, sipping coffee, jogging, or enjoying the skyline. She sat on a bench, scanning the crowd for anyone who might be looking for her. Eventually, a man in his mid-30s with a faded Chicago Cubs cap approached. He sat down a short distance away, fiddling with the brim of his hat, occasionally shooting furtive glances in her direction. After a few moments of awkward tension, he slowly got up and took the seat next to her. He spoke without turning his head. "You're Ava Rodriguez, right?" "Yes," she replied softly. "Who are you?" The man hesitated, eyes still fixed on the water. "Name's Reggie Thomas. I was locked up once, claimed. Harding planted a gun on me. But I didn't have money for a good lawyer. Ended up serving 8 months before they dropped the charges." He swallowed hard, as if the memory still hurt. "I always suspected Harding had his reasons, probably just needed a stat, or wanted to keep his reputation as a tough cop." Ava's pulse quickened. "Why come forward now?" Reggie glanced around as if afraid someone might overhear. "Because I heard about your case from a friend. I've seen your story pop up on a local blog that covers police corruption." I recognized Harding's face in the screenshot. "Guy's a racist. He looks for people like us." He gestured between them, referring to their shared minority backgrounds. "I figure if enough of us speak up, maybe we can end his career." Ava nodded, forcing herself to remain calm, despite the excitement bubbling inside her. "Would you be willing to testify?" "My attorney can use your statement to show a pattern of misconduct." Reggie tensed. "Look, I want to help, but testifying against a cop like Harding could make my life hell. He's got connections. I don't want any trouble." Ava's face fell. "I get it. I really do. But if you don't, he'll keep doing this." He was silent for a moment. Finally, he sighed. "All right. But only if your lawyer can guarantee I'll be protected. And no one can know I was here today." Ava exhaled with relief. "Thank you. We'll do everything we can to keep you safe." They exchanged contact information. Reggie stood, gave a nervous nod, and walked away, merging into the crowd. Ava lingered a bit longer, reflecting on how one man's willingness to speak could be the key to her freedom. She texted Kwan immediately, using a code they had agreed upon, to confirm she had found a credible potential witness. The private investigator, who had been watching from a distance, quietly signaled that they would follow Reggie to ensure he reached home safely. As for Ava, she felt something she hadn't felt in a while. Real hope. Word traveled fast in the precinct, it seemed. Not long after Ava met with Reggie, she received a chilling phone call. The caller ID was unknown. She answered hesitantly. A low voice crackled on the line. "You think you're clever meeting strangers in public places? We see you. Keep digging, and it'll get worse than a possession charge." The line went dead. Ava's hand trembled around the phone. Was it Harding or one of his cronies? She immediately called Kwan, her breath ragged with fear. He told her to record the incident and to stay vigilant. "If this escalates, we'll report it as witness tampering or harassment," he said. But the call was enough to rattle Ava profoundly. Mona insisted on staying over more often, determined not to leave Ava alone. At night, every sound outside Ava's window felt magnified, the scuffle of feet, a passing car's engine, even the wind against the glass. Sleep became elusive, yet in the background, legal preparations continued. Kwan's request for Harding's disciplinary records finally yielded some results. There were multiple complaints filed by citizens, most of which were unsubstantiated. But a few had notes indicating insufficient evidence rather than outright dismissal. There was also mention of an administrative hearing for improper conduct a few years prior. The file didn't specify details, but it was enough to show a pattern. Armed with Reggie's testimony and the store video footage, Kwan prepared to demand a full hearing to challenge the probable cause for Ava's arrest. Meanwhile, Ava's criminal trial loomed closer. Each day, she wavered between terror at the prospect of conviction and a fierce resolve to clear her name. Her emotional state wasn't the only thing taking a hit. The cost of legal defense began piling up, draining her savings. She had to suspend her job hunt, too distracted and tarnished by the arrest. Friends from her law school days heard whispers about her case, and some distanced themselves, unsure what to believe. It was an isolating experience, broken only by the unwavering support of Mona and the unwavering professionalism of Kwan. Through it all, she clung to one thought. If she could survive this, maybe she could turn it into something positive. Maybe she could become an advocate for others who had been framed or silenced. But first, she had to beat Harding at his own rigged game. Days turned to weeks. One afternoon, Kwan called Ava in a state of cautious excitement. He had received partial discovery from the police department, internal memos, complaints, and most interestingly, a snippet of dash cam footage from Harding's cruiser. The department had turned it over late, and only after repeated demands. "Don't get your hopes up too high," Kwan warned over the phone. "The footage is short and doesn't show the entire stop, but it might give us something to work with." Ava rushed to Kwan's office. The dashcam file was queued up on his computer. She and Mona watched with bated breath as the video began. The camera showed Harding inside his cruiser, pulling behind Ava's car. The audio crackled as he radioed in her plate number. Then something curious happened. Harding appeared to be rummaging around in the passenger seat before stepping out. His movements were partially obscured by the steering wheel, but it looked like he was tucking something into his belt or pocket. "Pause it there," Ava said, leaning forward. "Is that the bag?" Kwan squinted at the screen. "Hard to tell, but it definitely looks like he's grabbing something." The department claimed they didn't have body cam footage from Harding that day, saying the camera was malfunctioning. This dash cam is all they provided. But this might bolster our case. Combined with the footage from the grocery store, we can paint a narrative that Harding had the bag on him before he ever searched your car. Mona folded her arms, eyes narrowing. And how convenient that his body cam was malfunctioning at the exact time he arrests you. Kwan nodded grimly. "It's suspicious to say the least. We'll show this to the judge. It might not be the nail in the coffin, but it pokes holes in Harding's credibility." Ava exhaled. For the first time in weeks, she felt a wave of relief. The puzzle pieces were starting to form a coherent picture. Harding rummaging in his cruiser seat, the angle from the grocery store camera showing him finding the bag, and Reggie's testimony about prior misconduct. Each piece alone might be dismissed, but together they were building a formidable case. As she left Kwan's office that day, Ava felt almost buoyant. The threat calls still haunted her, and the road to exoneration was still fraught with uncertainty. But tangible cracks were forming in Harding's veneer of legitimacy. Ava vowed to press harder, to push for the truth to come out in full force. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived, bringing a tangible tension to the air. Ava entered the courthouse accompanied by Kwan and Mona. The halls echoed with the hushed murmurs of attorneys, clients, and families waiting anxiously for their cases to be called. In the courtroom, Officer Harding was already seated dressed in his uniform, exuding an air of stoic confidence. He barely glanced in Ava's direction, but she could feel his presence radiating hostility. The prosecutor, a young woman with a neat bun and a serious demeanor, stood beside him. Ava's heart beat painfully in her chest. She forced herself to remain calm, reminding herself that the evidence was on her side. The hearing began with the usual procedural steps. Then Kwan presented the motion to suppress the evidence, arguing that the drugs found in Ava's car were planted, making the search illegal and the evidence inadmissible. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes, listened intently. Kwan started by showing the dashcam footage, pausing at the moment Harding appeared to retrieve something from the passenger seat. Your Honor, this footage suggests that Officer Harding already had the contraband before he even approached my client's vehicle. The prosecutor interjected. That's purely speculative. The item could be anything. Kwan continued. Next, we have external camera footage from a nearby store. He played the grocery store footage, highlighting Harding's body language as he circled the trunk. You can clearly see him produce a bag from his person before appearing to find it in the trunk. The prosecutor objected. The footage is grainy. It's not definitive. Officer Harding will testify that the bag was discovered inside the trunk. Finally, Kwan dropped the bombshell. Your Honor, we also have a sworn affidavit from a former defendant, Mr. Reggie Thomas, who claims that Officer Harding planted evidence on him in a prior case. Mr. Thomas's charges were eventually dropped. This suggests a pattern of misconduct. Harding's jaw tightened, and he shifted in his seat. The prosecutor tried to dismiss Reggie's statement as unreliable testimony from a convicted felon, but the judge allowed Kwan to read portions of the affidavit into the record. It painted a damning picture of Harding's tactics. Throughout the hearing, Harding maintained a rigid posture, but Ava could see the tension in his shoulders. When he was called to testify, he stuck to his story. I found a suspicious plastic bag in Ms. Rodriguez's trunk during a lawful stop. She matched the description of a suspect's vehicle from a bolo alert earlier that day. Kwan hammered him on cross-examination, zeroing in on the dash cam footage and his so-called malfunctioning body cam. Harding replied with practiced answers. Equipment failures happen, and the item I retrieved from my cruiser was my flashlight. He produced no receipts, no log entries that might verify any of this. His story, while consistent, seemed riddled with coincidences. At the end of the day, the judge didn't dismiss the case outright. However, he conceded there were enough irregularities to warrant closer scrutiny. He scheduled a second hearing to determine the admissibility of the narcotics evidence, instructing both sides to gather more information. Although Ava had hoped for an immediate dismissal, Kwan considered it a victory of sorts. The judge hadn't accepted Harding's narrative at face value, which was a small but significant step. Harding, on the other hand, left the courtroom with a defiant glare, as if silently warning Ava. This isn't over. A week after the preliminary hearing, Kwan's private investigator, Darius Mills, unearthed additional information about Harding. Turns out Harding had connections to a small circle of officers known for aggressive policing, especially in minority neighborhoods. The group had faced multiple complaints for excessive force and allegations of discriminatory arrests, but the internal affairs investigations had gone nowhere due to lack of substantial evidence. Ava was in Kwan's office when Darius arrived with the scoop. He laid out the documents, some official, some gleaned from interviews with local community leaders. Harding grew up in a nearby suburb, joined the force fresh out of the academy, and quickly aligned himself with older officers who had questionable reputations, Darius explained. He's essentially learned to navigate the system to his advantage. Kwan studied the papers, nodding slowly. This could help us establish a pattern for the judge and the jury. If we show that Harding routinely targets minorities, plants evidence, or skews incident reports, Ava's credibility goes up while his goes down. Despite the progress, Ava felt a knot of anger and fear tighten in her stomach. Learning about Harding's history only confirmed her worst suspicions. He was part of a systemic problem, not just a lone bad apple. How many other people had suffered like she was suffering now? How many had lost their jobs, their families, their freedom because of him? She looked at Darius, her voice trembling with resolve. We have to bring all of this out into the open. People need to know. Kwan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We will. But we have to do it methodically. If we rush this, we risk losing the case and giving Harding free rein to continue. Patience, Ava. Patience. It was a word that grated on her nerves, but she knew he was right. Every piece of evidence they gathered was a step closer to vindication, and potentially a step closer to bringing Harding to justice. The next court date was fast approaching, and the tension felt like a coil wound so tight it might snap at any moment. The second hearing was set for a Tuesday morning. This time, the courtroom had a larger audience, community members, activists who had heard rumors about Ava's case, and even a couple of local reporters who sensed a bigger story might be unfolding. Ava felt their eyes on her, but she tried to focus on the proceedings. Kwan presented the newly found background about Harding's circle of officers. He argued that the repeated allegations and insufficient evidence findings indicated a pattern, Your Honor. It seems that whenever Officer Harding faces scrutiny, critical pieces of evidence vanish or fail to materialize. His body cam malfunction here appears to be part of a larger trend. The prosecutor tried to dismiss the allegations as unverified rumors, but Kwan called Reggie Thomas to the stand to share his testimony. Reggie's hands shook as he recounted the night he claims Harding planted a weapon on him. He described how Harding repeatedly used racial slurs and threatened to throw the book at him if he didn't confess to a crime he didn't commit. The prosecutor attempted to undermine Reggie's credibility by bringing up his prior record for petty theft, but Reggie stood firm. When Harding took the stand once again, Kwan grilled him about Reggie's allegations and the dash cam footage. Harding's cool facade began to crack. He stumbled over an explanation for why his cruiser logs didn't show any mention of retrieving a flashlight at the time in question. His voice tightened, and he threw a glare at Ava as if to blame her for his predicament. Finally, the judge spoke. Given the growing evidence suggesting potential misconduct, I find it necessary to set a formal hearing on the admissibility of the narcotics in question. Officer Harding, we will require your full cooperation, including access to your complete body cam maintenance records and any related internal affairs documents. It was a major turning point. The narcotics that were central to the prosecutor's case against Ava were suddenly in jeopardy of being ruled inadmissible. Without that evidence, the state had no case. Outside the courtroom, a small cluster of reporters peppered Ava and Kwan with questions. Kwan answered cautiously, sticking to the facts. Ava, for her part, looked directly into one camera and said, "I'm fighting for my freedom. But this is also about justice for everyone. Officer Harding has harmed. I won't rest until the truth comes out." The glare Harding gave her as he walked by was colder than anything she'd ever seen. But she felt no fear this time, only the righteous fire of someone who had endured enough and was prepared for whatever lay ahead. A few days later, Ava's story hit the local news in a bigger way. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune had been following cases of alleged police misconduct and saw Ava's case as a potential tipping point. The headline read, "Evidence Tampering Allegations Against CPD Officer More Victims. Step Forward." The article recapped Ava's arrest, the questionable footage, and the newly revealed background on Harding. It also mentioned Reggie Thomas's testimony and posed the question of whether other individuals might come forward with similar stories. The response was swift. Social media lit up with comments, some supportive, others skeptical. But the most important outcome was that a handful of people contacted Kwan's office, claiming they too had been mistreated or wrongfully arrested by Harding or his associates. While their stories varied, a pattern of intimidation and dubious evidence seemed to emerge. The public spotlight intensified pressure on the department. An internal affairs investigation was launched to re-examine Harding's record. Local community activists held a small protest in front of the precinct, demanding justice for Ava and accountability for officers who engaged in racist policing. Behind closed doors, Ava wrestled with a swirl of emotions relief that she was no longer fighting in the dark anxiety over the possibility of retaliation, and a renewed sense of responsibility to see this through for everyone who had suffered under Harding's watch. At night, the ominous calls continued once or twice a week, always from an unknown number, always with threats laced in hateful language. Ava documented each one, saving voicemails to share with Kwan and to provide to the authorities if needed. Part of her worried that Harding or his allies might make good on those threats, but she refused to be intimidated into silence. This was no longer just about her innocence. It was about challenging an entire system that had allowed a racist cop to thrive. And with every phone call, every protest sign, and every new piece of evidence, she felt the tide turning in her favor. As the date for the formal hearing on the narcotics evidence approached, the tension around Harding grew palpable. Rumors circulated that some of his fellow officers were distancing themselves from him, worried they might be dragged down by his alleged misconduct. A former partner of Harding's was rumored to be negotiating with internal affairs, possibly offering information in exchange for leniency. Ava stayed close to Kwan's guidance, avoiding any direct confrontations or public statements outside the courtroom. She spent her days poring over her own notes, legal precedents, and anything else she could find to bolster her case. Mona. Ever the Rock ensured Ava ate properly and took breaks from the relentless stress. One evening, as Ava was leaving Kwan's office, she caught a glimpse of Harding waiting in the lobby. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes fixed on her. Instinctively, Ava's chest tightened. She stood still, refusing to be the first to look away. He walked up, a menacing smirk on his face. All this fuss for a little bag of coke, Ava. You'd think you'd be grateful for the attention. She felt her anger flare. Is that a confession? Officer Harding? He let out a short, humorless laugh. Don't think you'll come out on top just because you found some grainy footage and a couple of disgruntled ex-cons. We both know how this city works. Ava took a step closer, her voice low. You're right. I do know how it works. And I'm not backing down. For a moment, his smirk faltered. Watch your back, he hissed. Then he brushed past her and out of the door, leaving her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and defiance. Finally, the day arrived for the formal evidentiary hearing to determine whether the narcotics found in Ava's trunk would be admissible in court. If Kwan could prove that Harding planted the drugs, the prosecution's case would collapse. Conversely, if the court ruled the evidence was valid, Ava would face a felony trial. The courtroom was packed, journalists, local activists, and a few citizens who claimed to have been wronged by Harding in the past. Even the Innocence Project had sent an observer recognizing the broader implications of Ava's case. The hearing began with the prosecution presenting Harding's version, a routine traffic stop, a discovered bag of cocaine, and probable cause for arrest. Then Kwan methodically dismantled that narrative. He introduced the dashcam footage, the grocery store camera footage, and Reggie's testimony. He even called the private investigator, to testify about Harding's background and the pattern of misconduct. The turning point came when Kwan revealed a last-minute witness, Harding's former partner, Officer Mitchell Stone. Stone took the stand reluctantly, his face pale. Under questioning, he admitted that he had witnessed Harding fabricate evidence in a different case. He told me it was necessary because the suspect was a thug who deserved it anyway. I knew it was wrong, but I was a rookie and afraid to speak up. Stone glanced at Ava, remorse evident in his eyes. I don't want to be part of covering this up anymore. I'm sorry. Harding, seated at the back of the courtroom, looked furious. A red flush crawled up his neck. He muttered something under his breath, glaring at Stone as though he'd committed the ultimate betrayal. When the time came for closing arguments, Kwan stood tall. Your Honor, this is no longer a question of whether Miss Rodriguez had drugs in her trunk. It's about whether we as a society allow officers like Harding to undermine the justice system by fabricating evidence and targeting individuals based on race. The evidence is overwhelming that this arrest was manufactured. The judge nodded solemnly, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. His decision came swiftly. In light of the credible testimony, the video evidence, and Officer Stone's confession regarding past misconduct, I find that the drugs in question are more likely than not the result of an unlawful search and potential evidence tampering. The motion to suppress is granted. The narcotics are inadmissible. Ava closed her eyes, her heart flooding with relief and gratitude. People in the gallery erupted in muffled applause and gasps. The prosecutor's face fell. Without the narcotics, they had no case. Ava was in essence free. But the judge wasn't done. He turned to Harding, who stood in the back, rigid as a statue. Furthermore, I'm recommending a formal investigation into Officer Harding's actions. If these allegations are proven true, there may be grounds for criminal charges against him. This hearing is adjourned. Ava exhaled a breath she felt she'd been holding for months. Harding, livid, stormed out of the courtroom without a word. Mona threw her arms around Ava, tears streaming down her face. Kwan patted her back, a small smile of triumph on his usually stoic face. At last, the scales of justice tipped in Ava's favor, and the consequences for Harding were only beginning. Following the hearing, formal charges against Ava were dropped. The media, already whipped into a frenzy, broke the news far and wide, charges dismissed in alleged evidence planting case. Investigation launched into Officer Harding. A local TV station managed to interview Ava outside the courthouse. Standing beside Mona and Kwan, she expressed relief and called for broader reforms to prevent such abuses of power. The Internal Affairs Department didn't waste time. They launched a full-scale investigation into Harding, aided by the testimony of Reggie Thomas, Officer Stone, and others who had stepped forward. Within weeks, Harding was placed on administrative leave, pending the results of the inquiry. Meanwhile, city officials publicly acknowledged the seriousness of the accusations. For Ava, a storm of emotions converged: elation at having her name cleared, anger at the injustice she had endured, and a resolve to make something positive out of this ordeal. She received job offers from several civil rights organizations, impressed by her resilience and legal acumen. The Innocence Project also reached out, offering her a fellowship position to assist in investigating wrongful convictions. With her future finally back on track, Ava had a choice to make. She could try to leave this painful chapter behind and move on with her life, or she could use her experience to fight systemic corruption. For her, it wasn't a difficult decision. She chose to stand alongside others who had been wrongfully accused, channeling her ordeal into a broader mission of reform. A few months later, the internal affairs investigation concluded. Its findings were damning. Harding had a pattern of misconduct, including fabricating evidence, bullying suspects, and using racist language while on duty. The department took the unprecedented step of recommending criminal charges against him for perjury and obstruction of justice. At the highly anticipated press conference, the police chief stood in front of a throng of reporters. "We do not tolerate corruption within our ranks," he said carefully, avoiding eye contact with the cameras. "Officer Harding's actions, as alleged, violate the core values of this department." The city's district attorney followed with an official statement. "We are pursuing charges against John Harding for his role in multiple wrongful arrests and for tampering with evidence. No one is above the law." For Harding, the hard karma he had tried to inflict on others came crashing back. He was handcuffed by fellow officers, ironically the same fate he had so often forced on innocent people. Video footage of his arrest went viral, sparking a public debate on the need for police accountability. A wave of relief swept through communities that had long felt targeted and silenced. Ava watched the footage from her new office at the Innocence Project. She felt no joy in seeing Harding in handcuffs, only a profound sense of justice served. Mona sat across from her, a look of satisfaction tempered by empathy on her face. "He finally got what was coming to him," she said. Ava nodded, recalling every sleepless night, every moment of terror. "I just hope this means fewer lives will be ruined by corrupt cops." In the following weeks, Ava settled into her role at the Innocence Project, driven by the conviction that her story was not unique. She worked closely with attorneys and investigators, combing through case files of other individuals, claiming they'd been framed or had evidence planted against them. Some of those cases led right back to Harding and his network, confirming Ava's suspicion that she was just one of many. Her experiences gave her a deeper empathy for clients who had lost years or even decades fighting a system stacked against them. Every day in the office felt like both a healing process for her and a new front in the battle for justice. Meanwhile, Harding faced a criminal trial of his own. Reggie Thomas, Officer Stone, and others testified, laying bare his long history of misconduct. The grocery store camera footage and the dashcam video that had saved Ava became key evidence against him. The jury, after a short deliberation, found him guilty of obstruction of justice and perjury. Sentencing was still pending, but he faced the very real possibility of prison time. One evening, as Ava was wrapping up work, she received a text from Mona. "Let's celebrate tonight. You deserve it." Ava smiled. She realized she hadn't truly celebrated her victory or her new job yet. She typed back, "Count me in." 7 p.m. at our favorite spot. The message sent, she leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. Life felt lighter now, the weight of false accusations lifted from her shoulders. And while the scars from her ordeal might never fully fade, they had transformed her into an even stronger advocate for justice. Ava's case and Harding's downfall sparked broader conversations in Chicago. Advocacy groups and community leaders demanded reforms. Increased transparency in police investigations, mandatory use of body cams with stricter oversight, and better legal protections for people falsely accused. A local alderman introduced a bill requiring more robust civilian oversight of the police department. While the legislation faced opposition from police unions, it also gained significant public support. Inspired by Ava's tenacity, a group of law students at Northwestern University started a student-led watchdog organization. They monitored public records for signs of police misconduct and provided legal support to low-income defendants. They called themselves the Rodriguez Project, in homage to Ava's courage. Ava was moved when she heard about the group. One afternoon, she visited them on campus, giving a talk about her experience and the need for sustained activism. "One victory doesn't fix a broken system," she told them. "We need all hands on deck." Months later, with Harding behind bars, Ava received an unexpected letter, an apology from Harding himself. It was short, scrawled in a shaky hand. "I did what I felt I had to do. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Reading it, Ava felt an odd mix of emotions: anger, pity, relief. She shared it with Mona, who snorted in disgust. "He's just sorry he got caught." Ava nodded in agreement, unsure if he was genuinely remorseful or simply grasping at some leniency. Either way, the apology didn't change the harm he had caused. Still, as she folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, Ava decided to let go of the anger she'd carried. Holding on to it would only tether her to the past. She had a future to build, a mission to fulfill, and more people to help. On a bright spring morning, Ava found herself standing in the headquarters of the Innocence Project, gazing at a framed newspaper clipping. "Woman cleared of false drug charge exposes corrupt cop." It was her story. It felt surreal to see her face and name plastered beneath the headline, but it also reminded her of how far she'd come. She had endured months of anxiety, threats, and doubt. She had risked her career and her safety to confront a corrupt system. And in the end, she hadn't just cleared her name. She had also played a part in dismantling a dangerous network within the police department. Other cases connected to Harding were now being overturned, and more officers were being investigated. As she turned away from the photo, her phone buzzed. A new client had arrived, someone claiming he was also framed by an overzealous officer. Another day, another battle for justice. Ava squared her shoulders, picking up her notepad and heading to the interview room. This was her calling her reason to wake up each morning, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. A year later, Ava Rodriguez was invited to speak at a criminal justice reform conference, sharing the stage with prominent activists and legal scholars. She recounted her harrowing experience, emphasizing the resilience it took not just to fight back, but to rebuild her life. Her story resonated with people from all walks of life: students, aspiring to law school community activists, and even some sympathetic police officers who believed in accountability and transparency within their ranks. When she finished, the standing ovation was deafening, and in that moment, Ava felt a profound sense of closure. Officer Harding's downfall served as a sobering reminder that no system is foolproof, and that individuals sworn to uphold the law can become its greatest violators. But Ava's triumph also showcased the power of a determined individual to fight back, to rally support, and to ignite change. The conference ended with renewed calls for systemic reform, a testament to the ripple effect of Ava's ordeal. As she walked off the stage, she spotted Mona beaming from the crowd and Kwan nodding in approval. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, there was still much work to be done. But for now, justice had prevailed. And Ava Rodriguez, once an unsuspecting target of a racist cop's scheme, was now a beacon of hope for countless others seeking the truth. Thank you for joining me on this intense journey of corruption, exposed and justice served. Ava Rodriguez's battle against a racist cop wasn't just about saving her own future. It was about standing up for everyone who's ever been silenced or wrongfully accused. In a world where power can be misused and manipulated, Ava's courage reminds us that truth can and will find its way to the light, especially when good people refuse to be silent. If this story moved, you don't keep it to yourself. Like this video to show your support. Share it with someone who needs to hear about perseverance and justice, and subscribe to this channel for more real, raw, and riveting stories. Because at the end of the day, our collective voices can tear down even the mightiest walls of corruption. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more inspiring tales.